Joe Goldberg is a bookstore manager with a penchant for literature, a sharp intellect, and an overwhelming need to control the narrative of his life and relationships. On the surface, he's charismatic, witty, and seemingly empathetic.
Have you been naughty or nice, little girl?
A man who loves deeply and protects fiercely. But beneath the veneer lies a darker reality. Joe is a serial stalker. He's Creepy Joe, and a murderer where obsessive love leads him to manipulate, control, and eliminate anyone he perceives as a threat to his idealized relationships. Hey everyone, welcome to Therapy Scenes. My name is John Cordray and I'm a licensed professional counselor. Therapy Scenes is all about analyzing the psychological and mental health indicators of fictional characters of TV shows and films, and it's a lot of fun. And today I'm providing a psychological analysis of Creepy Joe, the manic and deeply troubled protagonist of You. Joe is a character who fascinates and unsettles me. A man whose charming exterior marks a web of psychological issues that drive his actions in ways that are both tragic and terrifying at the same time. My goal is to unpack Joe's mental health indicators, explore the themes that emerge his behaviors, and consider how these can inform therapeutic interventions, both for Joe and for individuals in real life who share similar struggles. Let's begin setting the stage where Joe is. Then we'll dive into the clinical lens through which we can understand his internal monologue, which the show brilliantly uses to pull us into his mind.
She was going to ruin you, but you're safe now, thanks to me. I just want you to live your best life. It's brave what I do for you. It's not easy. It's hard. Sometimes it makes me sick. I'm brave.
Reveals a man who justifies his actions through a distorted sense of morality, love, and protection. As a counselor, Joe's behavior raises red flags all over the place, across multiple domains of mental health. And the story offers a rich tapestry for exploring themes like obsession, trauma, personality disorders, and the interplay of attachment and violence. Let's start with the most glaring mental health indicators, and that's Joe's obsessive behavior. From the moment he fixates on a romantic interest, Joe exhibits classic signs of obsessive-compulsive tendencies, though not in a traditional OCD sense. His obsessions manifest as an all-consuming focus of his love object, coupled with intrusive thoughts about their safety, loyalty, and place in his carefully constructed fantasy. He engages in compulsive behaviors to alleviate the anxiety these thoughts provoke, stalking their social media, following them in real life, and even breaking into their homes to gather more information.
Not since Karen. I hardly look at your Facebook 2 or 3 times a day, max. I'm happy. I want you to be happy. It's what happy people want for people.
These actions aren't random. They're driven by a need to control the narrative and eliminate any uncertainty. In a therapeutic setting, I'd explore whether Joe's obsessions stem from an underlying anxiety disorder or perhaps a more complex condition, like obsessive love disorder, a controversial but relevant framework for understanding pathological fixations in relationships. This brings us to the key theme: distorted attachment and love. Joe's understanding of love is deeply skewed, rooted in an idealized, almost literary vision of romance where he casts himself as the hero and his partner as a damsel in need of saving.
Beck, you've got a stalker.
This dynamic points to an insecure attachment style, likely disorganized, shaped by early experiences of abandonment and trauma. We learn in the series that Joe's childhood was marked by neglect, abuse, and loss.
Whenever I hang with Henry, I'm reminded of 2 things. 1, he hates me. 2, I have to protect him at all costs from what happened to me.
His mother was inconsistent and ultimately abandoned him.
I didn't have good parents, but I know what a good parent does. Protect.
And he witnessed and committed violence at a young age. These experiences likely fractures his ability to form healthy attachments, leaving him with a profound fear of abandonment and a desperate need to control relationships to prevent it. In therapy, I would use attachment theory to help Joe recognize how his early experiences shape his current behaviors, encouraging him to explore vulnerability without resorting to manipulation or control. Joe's childhood trauma is a critical lens for understanding mental health.
I'm gonna do everything I can. I just don't know what that means yet.
Trauma often leaves lasting imprints on the psyche, and for Joe, it manifests itself in hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, and a fragmented sense of self. His internal dialogue reveals a man constantly justifying his actions.
But as much as I'm hoping this is just the stage, a quick password search on your iCloud has revealed a swipe fest of millennial manboys,
which suggests a coping mechanism for unresolved guilt and shame. For example, when Joe kills, he frames it as a necessary act to protect his loved one or preserve the relationship, a rationalization that distances him from the moral weight of his actions.
The next thing our little friend the internet gave me was your address. She wants to watch you, have you, control you like she controls every other piece of her life. She wants you all to herself. Beck, you've got a stalker.
This disassociation is a hallmark of trauma-related disorders, such as post-traumatic stress disorder or even complex PTSD, though Joe's symptoms don't fully align with these diagnoses alone. I would approach Joe's trauma with a trauma-informed lens, using techniques like narrative therapy to help him reframe his story and process the pain of his past without letting it dictate his present. Another critical mental health indicator is Joe's potential personality pathology here, particularly traits associated with narcissistic personality disorder and even antisocial personality disorder. Let's break this down. Joe exhibits narcissistic traits, a grandiose sense of self, a belief that he is uniquely capable of understanding and saving his partners, and a lack of empathy for those he deems as obstacles. His internal monologue often positions him as morally superior even when committing heinous acts. However, unlike classic narcissists, Joe doesn't seek widespread admiration. His grandiosity is more covert, tied to his role as the perfect partner.
When we live together, your place won't be a pigsty. I'll clean for us. I'll cook for you every day. I promise. I'll even do your laundry.
On the antisocial personality front, Joe's disregard for societal norms, repeated criminal behavior, and a lack of remorse for his victims align with the psychopathic tendencies, though he's not a textbook psychopath. His ability to feel love, guilt, and self-reflection, however distorted, suggests a more complex picture here. In therapy, I would assess for cluster B personality traits, using tools like the MCMI-4 to clarify whether Joe meets the criteria for NPD or ASPD, or even perhaps borderline personality disorder given his fear of abandonment and emotional safety. This leads to a broader theme here, the interplay of empathy and violence. Joe is a paradox. He's capable of profound empathy for his romantic partners and even for strangers. Yet he can switch to cold, calculated violence when his goals are threatened. This selective empathy is fascinating from a clinical perspective. It suggests that Joe's capacity for connection is innate, but overridden by his need for control and his distorted moral framework. I would explore this dichotomy here, using cognitive behavioral therapy to challenge his rationalizations and help him develop a more consistent sense of empathy. And perspective exercises, asking Joe to imagine the impact of his actions on his victims, not just his loved ones. This would be a slow process as Joe's defenses are deeply entrenched, but it's a critical step towards accountability. Let's pivot to another mental health indicator, which is delusional thinking. Joe's internal narrative often veers to delusion, particularly when he constructs elaborate justifications for his actions.
Can't report him, that's not how it works.
Not worried. I've seen enough romantic comedies to know guys like me are always getting in jams like this.
These aren't psychotic delusions. It isn't attached from reality as in schizophrenia sense, but they reflect a cognitive distortion that borders on delusional ideation. This could point to a thought disorder, or more likely a severe form of confirmation bias, rooted in his need to maintain his self-image as a good person. He could use reality testing here, gently challenging Joe's narrative by asking for evidence that contradicts his beliefs. For instance, if your actions are meant to protect your partner, why do they often lead to harm? This approach would aim to disrupt his cognitive distortions and foster self-awareness.
How have you been?
Oh, I'm fine, bored, trapped in Pleasantville, aging so fast.
I'm good.
Another reoccurring theme here in You is Joe's story of moral injury, the psychological distress that arises from actions that violate one's moral code. Despite his rationalizations, Joe shows flickers of guilt and self-loathing, particularly when confronted with the consequences of his actions. This suggests that Joe's moral compass, while it's warped, isn't entirely absent here. Moral injury is often associated with veterans or first responders, but it applies to Joe's repeated violations of his own ethical standards, however skewed they may be. Another technique could be expressive therapies, like journaling or art, to help Joe articulate his internal conflict and process the dissonance between his actions and his self-perception. This could be a pathway to rebuild a healthier moral framework. Let's consider Joe's impulsivity and risk-taking here, which is evident in his reckless decisions.
Look at that! How dare she invade your privacy like that? It's perverse.
These behaviors suggest deficits in executive functioning, possibly linked to his trauma or personality pathology. Impulsivity is a transdiagnostic feature appearing in disorders like BBD or ASPD or even ADHD, though the latter is less likely for Joe. Joe could also use dialectical behavioral skills here, particularly distress tolerance and emotional regulation, to help him pause and reflect before acting on his impulses. Role-playing scenarios where he faces perceived threats to his relationship could help him practice alternative responses, reducing his reliance on violence and manipulation.
Sometimes we call him 40.
His name's Henry. A good therapist would dig into why our child is named after her dead addict, codependent brother.
Another theme worth exploring is identity disturbance. Joe's sense of self-fluid, shaped by the women he loves and the roles he adopts to win their affection. He's a bookstore clerk, a suburban dad, a professor, each persona crafted to fit his current obsession. This chameleon-like quality aligns with borderline personality disorder, where individuals struggle with a stable sense of identity. Joe's internal monologue often reveals self-doubt and fear of being found out, suggesting an underlying emptiness. We could also use person-centered therapy as well to help him explore who he is beyond his relationships, encouraging him to define his values and goals independently. Let's touch a little bit on substance use and coping mechanisms here. While Joe isn't depicted as having a substance use disorder, he relies heavily on maladaptive coping strategies like stalking and violence intellectualization to manage his emotions. These are like drugs to him. His love for literature, while admirable, also serves as an escape, allowing him to retreat into a world of idealized narratives rather than face his pain.
Honestly, he seemed a little creepy.
What can I say, friend? I have creepy taste in friends.
Joe can use healthier coping mechanisms, like mindfulness and grounding techniques, to help him stay present with his emotions. The show You critiques the role of technology in enabling stalking.
I'm happy. I want you to be happy. It's what happy people want for people.
As Joe uses social media and digital tools to invade his partner's lives.
What the hell? No.
Where did you go? How the hell am I supposed to be great with you being gone if you're actually gone?
This raises questions and concerns about how technology can invade other people's privacy and make it really easy for others to stalk and harm. Joe's idealized view of love reflects cultural narratives about romance as all-consuming and redemptive, which he twists to justify his actions. Finally, I want to address the cycle of harm and the potential for change. Joe's story is a tragic loop of obsession, violence, and fleeting remorse, with each season showing him repeating the same patterns in new context. Yet his moments of self-awareness, however brief, suggests a capacity for growth. In a therapeutic setting, change would require Joe to take accountability, process his trauma, and rebuild his sense of self and morality. This would be an uphill battle, given his entrenched defensiveness and criminal history, but it's not impossible. Change can happen and new neural pathways can be developed through therapy. So what did you think about you? What do you think about Joe? Joe is a classic case of mental health indicators all over the place, and it makes for great entertainment. But I also want to pause and reflect that even though Joe is a fictional character, his actions and behaviors happen all the time in real life. People stalk others, people harm others, people get obsessive and easily attached with others all the time. And Joe's story illuminates themes like the interplay of empathy and violence, moral injury, and the impact of cultural narratives on psychological dysfunction. So if Joe was in my office and I was working with him, I would use a blend of trauma-informed care, CBT, DBT, and person-centered therapy. Joe's character in the show You offers so many things that we can creeped out by and also entertained by his actions and the people that he meets. It also brings out the consequences of untreated mental health. What do you think of the character Joe in You? Do you see other mental health indicators in him? What do you think about his behaviors? They're pretty creepy, aren't they? I would love to know your thoughts. Drop a note in the comments and let's get this discussion going on Joe and the show You. Maybe you have another show you want me to look at and analyze. I would love to know. Drop me a note in the comments and let me know what show or film you want me to do next. Thank you so much for watching Therapy Scenes. I always have fun talking about and using my expertise as a mental health therapist and using entertainment and pop culture like TV shows and movies to bring out these mental health indicators. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time on Therapy Scenes.
So wait, you don't hate me?
Yeah.
Well, same here. Okay, now it's a good talk.